I am not wanting to do this episode. I feel the resistance, and I'm like, you just need to stand in your truth, Sabrina. You just need to stand in your truth, Rin. You just need to show up and start. So here we are. Welcome to the Staying Wild and Well podcast. My name is Rin, and my greatest accomplishment is being alive. Here we talk about life's journey, the ups, the downs, the in-betweens, all things mental health, body, mind, and spirit. We share wild stories and keeping your wild alive while staying well. It is so challenging to fall for somebody and to have to let them go. It is so challenging to be in love with somebody and have to let them go because you know they just aren't where you are at. This episode is for you if you are struggling to move past a relationship. If you are struggling getting this person out of your head. This episode is for you if you can't accept that you guys are over. This episode is for you if you have doubt that you will ever meet a person and fall in love or fall into infatuation or experience what you did with anybody ever again. By the end of this episode, you are going to learn that there is so much more meaning behind what you had gone through with this individual. You are going to find, oh my God, it all makes sense. And if you take it in the way I want you to take it in, you are going to realize you can move on. You can move on and you can feel great. All right, I'm going to bring you into the world. I've been walking around the garden, you guys. I have told you bits and pieces about the falling out of my marriage and falling into someone new. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back on previous episodes and I bring you into that world. But I thought, why not dive in and explain to you the type of connection that I shared with this person? Because when we are in relationship, when we fall into infatuation with someone, if we fall in love with someone in the beginning, it is magical. But I had never experienced what I'm going to share with you in my entire life. In my entire 36 years of life, I had not experienced this. And I think that's why it was so profound, because it truly was a spiritual connection. It was never physical. It was never a relationship. It was something beyond anything. So let me take you into this world. And I have notes because there was a lot that happened within a 6-month span that just sent my world in circles. So this person that I met went to the same gym as me. And I met this person while I was in deep struggle and challenge within my marriage. Previous to meeting this person, it had been a year of back and forth in my marriage and begging my partner to work on our relationship. And it was hard. So meeting this person was really enlightening because I had made a new friend when I felt quite alone. I hadn't been speaking to any of my friends about what I had gone through. So how did this connection start? One day I was at the gym. This person came up to me and said, wow, you're doing some amazing work on those stairs. Because I was my trainer had me running up the Stairmaster, next level stuff, you guys. And he was like, what are your goals? What are your targets? And I was like, you know what? I don't really have a goal. I look out that window and I stare at those trees and I picture that I'm in the forest. And that's what helps me get through being on the Stairmaster and running for as long as I was. And he was like, that's some David Goggins shit. If you don't know who David Goggins is, I'm going to write that down in the show notes because you got to check out David Goggins. He is incredible and very intense. Okay, so yeah, I was like, he knows David Goggins. In my mind, I was like, interesting, because I don't know a lot of people in my circle that listen to the same type of podcast, follow the same influential leaders that I do. So I was intrigued. I was like, cool. He knows who David Goggins is. And he said, well, maybe one day I'm going to train with you on the stairs. And I was like, yeah, sure, come join. I felt so good, you guys. My ego was all like, yeah, I'm that girl on the stairs. Oh my God, the stairs. Anyways, so one day I'm on the stairs and he's on the other stairs. We never really talk. We just kind of like, hey, how's it going? Nothing big. But my cap off my shaker cup fell to the ground. Interestingly so, I always take the cap off and sip out of a shaker cup like that, but for whatever reason that day, I had twisted the cap off and took a sip. And then the cap fell down, and in my mind, I'm like, I want to use that shaker cup later. Is the lid up or is it facing down? And I'm like on the stairs, I'm going to get it later. And he walked by and he picked it up and he said, just so you know, the lid was facing this way. And I was like, thank you, universe. And I had followed up and said, didn't see you doing hard work on the stairs. And he was like, I'll meet you on the stairs the next day. And the rest was kind of history. After that, our conversations grew. He joined me on the stairs. I did the countdown. We ran together. We shared a lot of commonalities, philosophy, music, talking about life, the trees. There was just a big synergetic connection that was taking place. He started talking to me about his job a little bit. It was very casual conversation. And the following day when he came to the gym, he had said, I just want to let you know, I'm married. And I was like, oh, that's fine. He's like, I just didn't want you to think I was hitting on you or anything. I'm like, no, like I'm married too. Thanks for telling me, which I really appreciated because you just never know. I had some weird incident happen at the gym before. You just never know. So I was very impressed that he came forward and said that. And we continued to talk. He spoke a little bit about family, culture, and religion and told me that there were some things there, but he wasn't ready to go into that conversation with me. And I didn't pry. I was like, hey, if ever you want to talk about it, I'm here. And the conversations just continued to flow. They were beautiful. And we started sharing music. And that was next level because I didn't know anybody. I have a playlist and it's called my healing playlist. And there was no one in my friend circle at the time or people who shared the same type of music as I did. So all of a sudden it was like, you know so-and-so? Oh my God, you know so-and-so? And there was just this great connection where he too was shocked at the fact that I knew his music and he knew mine. And we were just connecting on the art behind music and the feeling. And when someone's playing music and the emotion you could see in their face and the words that they use, it was really something beautiful. Next thing I knew, I was starting to get really excited to go to the gym and I was feeling so happy going to work. And he would come to the gym and he'd be like, man, I'm going to work in such a better mood. And it was because we thought because we were starting the day off with such a high note, talking about the beauty of life and the connection, like I said, to the trees and the forest and the animals and the plants and sharing music and philosophy and mental health and just sharing positive energy. And so I remember going to work being like, hey guys, I met a cool new friend. I even went home to my husband despite our challenges and being like, I met this really cool new friend. We have a lot in common. And I don't know, it was like starting your day off on a high. And I think what was maybe unseen at the time is that feelings were starting to develop on both our ends, but we weren't aware of them right away. It really just felt like this is a really cool new friend and there's a lot in common here. Anyways, eventually, my friend, Mountain Man, opened up and started talking to me about his culture and his religion and how he didn't believe in his culture and he didn't believe in his religion and the things he had been challenged with since he had been a young boy, and that he tried to fit into the culture and he tried to fit into the religion and he tried to fit in with his family, but it never felt right. And that he would try and speak his language, but they would always end up speaking to him in English, and how he never felt a true sense of belonging, and that it didn't feel like unconditional love because it felt like he had to show up in a certain way and, do the fasting of his religion as he was Muslim and didn't necessarily feel in alignment with it. He didn't feel in alignment with prayer. And then there was confusion as well around, this is how I was raised, and is this what I believe? And starting to do a deep dive and trying to explore. And I was supporting him. I was very much so stand in your truth. If he had told me that he really firmly believed in his religion, I would have been like, amazing. Like, that's also really great. What I believe, whatever you believe in, and whatever instills hope and gives you the joy to live your life, do it. Do you. There is never any judgment. We are all on an individual journey. And I think the number one thing that we could ever do is connect to our truth and follow our truth, no matter who you are. So when he told me he didn't believe in his culture and his religion, I was like, you got to stand in your truth. And we would joke around and we would talk about like the free-spirited list that he would have of all the things he wanted to do that he felt he couldn't do because he was taught that doing these things or showing up in these ways wasn't okay. He spoke to me about the fact that he had children but didn't necessarily want them, and that he loved them, but it was something that he did because he felt like, my wife would be a good mom and this is what you're supposed to do. And as these conversations grew more and more, you could see that the stress that he had been experiencing was growing. And he came to the gym one day and was like, Sabrina, I feel like I'm living a lie. I feel like my whole life is a lie. I feel like everything from, marrying a Muslim woman, though I love her and I appreciate her, I married her because she had to fit the criteria, and the way I show up is because I had to fit a criteria, and was really battling with himself. And I kept trying to hold space and support him in whatever capacity I could, with my limited knowledge of what actually went into this type of religion and this type of culture. So I started to do research to understand what are the belief systems, what goes into this. And he expressed to me that he was nervous to tell me that he was Muslim and that he fasts, because he didn't know what my thought process would be, because the conversations that he and I had been having had been very much about universal connection and free spirit. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't care. I would never judge you. So our dynamic had really become about me supporting him. And when he opened up about his culture and his religion, I started to open up about some of the challenges that I had been facing in my marriage. And he started to advise me on things that I could do to potentially better my marriage, or, convince my partner to meet me where I was at. And I would take that advice and I would try and implement it at home. Naturally, because I had already been going through these challenges for over a year, it was in a place where it didn't really matter what I tried to do in my marriage. It was definitely coming to an end, and it was really challenging. But nevertheless, I was in a desperate state and crying often at night that I would try any advice that I was given, even though it didn't work. So as you can see, this relationship that was cultivated, we were really supporting each other in this beautiful way. Eventually what happened, my marriage ended. As the connection grew, we started to share and get to know each other on a deeper level. It was like, okay, well, what do you do in your spare time? And for me, it was, I love nature walks, and I love hiking, and I love poetry writing, and I love having a big fire and chopping wood and spending time and fresh organic food and my business. And I would speak about my mental health challenges, as I've been open here about OCD and the things I've gone through. He would share his past and who he was and what he enjoyed. So we started sharing poetry, writing. I shared some of my poetry from the past. I said, hey, I haven't written in a really long time, but here's something I wrote like last year. And then he wrote me poetry and said he hadn't written in a really long time, but also never wrote in the ways that he was starting to write, that he felt like something was almost channeled through him. And the first poem he had written me had said, maybe you don't know how to dance because no one has ever called you to movement. Move me. And it was very subliminal. And obviously what he meant by that was I shared that I didn't know how to dance. So he was sharing that line in projection to the things that I had told him. And I was like, that had sparked something within me. I remember my heart was racing, and I was like, why is my heart racing? Again, I think that feelings had developed before I even recognized they had. And I think feelings on his end had developed even though he didn't recognize that they had. Suddenly, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to go to the gym and talk to this person, hang out with this person. It was like going to bed felt so long, and waking up, it was like ready to go. Like there was all this energy, and I had never in my life experienced the whole can't sleep, can't eat. So I remember Googling, is this what it feels like when you fall for someone? Is this what it feels like when you're in love with someone? And I was in denial because I was like, this can't be. I've just fallen out of my marriage. I can't be falling for somebody. This is strange behavior that's showing up in my body. And even though a lot of what Google said, oh my God, like you're so desperate, you go to Google. I was in denial. I was in a lot of denial. So, so we continued to talk about his free-spirited life, sharing poetry, and one day I was driving, and this is where it gets woo-woo, guys. You know that I have spiritual gifts that I've talked about a little bit here and there, and the things that I believe in. I remember driving, and I was listening to this song, and it was a song I used to listen to by myself, and suddenly I was like, oh my God, I feel this person through this song. And I always felt an entity or a deeper connection through this song when I would listen to it, but never was able to connect it to what that feeling was. But suddenly it was very familiar. It was a very known feeling. And I remember, even though it was the weekend, I was driving, I felt him. And I was like, how is this possible? And my eyes watered up and I started to cry. And I was like, why am I crying? And it felt like I had known this person my whole life from my past life. And it felt very much like we have found each other and reconnected. And we had lost each other. And I was like, crying because I'm like, I don't want this connection to go away, but it will. This is not going to last. This person isn't going to be in your life forever. And I was crying and connected. And then I came to the gym the next day and he said, Sabrina, you wouldn't believe it. I was listening to the song, which was the same song that I was listening to, and I felt you. I can't even describe it. And I looked down and I'm like, I felt you too. And he's like, what time? And I grabbed my phone and I showed him that in my notes, I had written down the time. He's like, how did you know I'd ask you what time? And I'm like, I have no idea. There was all this very synergetic, energetic things, experiences, I don't know, that started to happen. Example, if I was feeling off, he'd message me and he'd go, are you okay right now? And I'd be like, no, how did you know? Like, there was like this, I don't know, you guys, if you believe, and I know that there's a lot of controversy in the media about this, but like twin flame energy, where it was like connected in the strangest type of way. So all of a sudden it's like, now I can't eat, I can't sleep, I'm excited to go to the gym and talk to this person. He can't eat, he can't sleep, he's excited to come to the gym. And now there's this synergetic connection that is like something you cannot lie about, you can't explain. When it was happening, we were both weirded out. What is going on? In the midst of all of this, we did end up admitting that we had feelings for one another and stated, well, we can be mature about this, recognizing that I'm in no place to be in a relationship. I was just falling out of my marriage and I needed to mourn the 17 years of my relationship. There was no way that I was interested in getting in another relationship. And well, as you know, he was married and he was in no way interested in leaving his marriage. In fact, he talked beautifully about his wife multiple times, but was still moving through the challenges of the culture and the religion and the lie that he felt he was living, which I think caused a lot of conflict. But we said we'd be mature about it and we would just remain friends and we didn't have to do anything about our feelings and to just let it be. And we would continue talking on the stairs. We would talk about that free-spirited list, and we would talk about, it would be so cool if we could hike together. And I was like, well, in my world, I could hike with anybody. In his world, he wasn't really allowed to hang out with women or talk to other women. So it was like bittersweet, almost like very imaginative of like, how cool would it be? So we couldn't hang out. Also, probably not a good idea, right, you guys? So he would guide me to specific places he thought that I would like. He would tell me about this coffee shop to go to. He'd be like, "It's so you, go." And I would go and I'd be like, "Oh my God, this is so me. How do you know? How did you know that I would love this?" And he's like, "I don't know. It's like you've been downloaded into my brain. I just know." And he did, you guys. I mean, when we admitted that we had feelings for one another, I remember going to the gym and him not showing up and me being like, "Oh my God, I felt so vulnerable and so exposed." And I remember walking on the stairs and being like, "Where are you? Like, how could you do this?" And like, we'd like texted through Instagram, and he was like, "Oh, I can't come to the gym today." And then he would just show up, and next thing I knew, he'd be on the stairs. And he did that often because, without going into too much detail, we tried to stop talking. Oh my God, like 10, 20 times. It was like, "No, we can't talk to each other. This is too intense. We can't talk to each other." Because the connection, even just by walking on the stairs and looking into each other's eyes, you could feel the intensity between the two of us. But somehow he would always show up. He would be like, "I can't take it. I want to talk to you." Or I'd go to another gym and he'd show up and he'd be like, "Come outside and talk to me." There was so much energy between the two of us. One day he had told me to go to his safe space, and his safe space was these train tracks that he used to go to when he was a kid, and he wanted me to go there and see it. And he would go there when he was a kid because he'd pretend running away from his family and getting on the train, and he would describe the way he would touch the ferns in the forest and really connect to the trees. And so I went one day, and not expecting anything, and telling him, "Do I go left or do I go right when I'm on the train tracks?" And he's like, "You go right and keep walking and look at the horizon." And I was like, "Yep, looking at the horizon." And then he's like, "Look to the right. Do you see the turkeys?" And then I'm like, "Look to the right. Do you see the turkeys?" I remember looking to the right, and I'm like, and then I turned around and there he was walking behind me on the train tracks. And this was the first time that we ever walked together in the forest, because as you know, he had always told me that he couldn't hang out or wouldn't hang out or was nervous to hang out, even though it would just be as friends. Anyways, you guys, we walked the forest and we didn't even really say much. It was just walking side by side. Again, it was all energy. Like, I can't describe it to you except for it was a very spiritual, profound connection where we didn't have to say anything and we just knew. It was feeling into the trees. It was feeling into the forest. It was feeling into one another. It was just holding space for someone who felt very familiar. I remember that day leaving, and he had messaged me and he said, "The image of you on the tracks will forever be ingrained in my mind." And I was like, how? No one has ever spoken to me this way. It was like universe was like, everything you've ever wanted to be told and said is going to be said to you. His poetry writing was very subliminally messaged to me. And then mine started being subliminally messaged to him as well. The words he would say, the intensity of the conversation. We spoke about eye gazing, and I remember one day at the gym, we were done cardio early, and he said, "Do you want to stretch?" And I'm like, "Oh, you want to stretch together?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Sure." So then our conversations went from just being on the stairs to stretching and having conversation at the gym. And he would look into my eyes while we were sitting there, and suddenly we're like eye gazing. I could imagine what people in the gym must have thought. And there's this gentleman in the gym who I love. He was an older gentleman. He'd come over and talk to us, and he'd be like, "What are you guys doing? Are you having a picnic or are you stretching?" And we were like, oh my God, like, it's obvious the energy that was being shared. So much so that the gentleman at the gym ended up bringing us cookies and biscuits because he's like, "Here you go for your picnic," which was so funny. And we would just talk for hours and share, again, me supporting him through his culture and his religion. And I don't know, just this beautiful connection about life, you guys. And it continued to evolve. We would continue to meet up and go for walks in the forest. He was beginning to just feel so free and alive. He would talk to me about the fact that he had never felt so happy, and that the energy and the things that he was experiencing in life were different, and the energy he would share at work. And he was like, I'm so afraid that this feeling is going to go away. I don't want to lose this connection that I've created with myself. I don't want this feeling, Sabrina, to go away. And I'm like, well, it doesn't have to go away. Stand in your truth, you know? I would encourage him to talk to his family about the way he was feeling. Of course, there were dynamics that I wouldn't understand when he would tell me, you know, well, they'll never talk to me again. I could be abandoned from the family because of the cultural and religious beliefs. And for me, that felt so strange, because I'm like, be who you are. I'm going to love you no matter what. This very unconditional type of love. But that's not how every culture and religion functions. And I was so oblivious and naive to that experience. So here I was pushing and motivating him to stand in his truth and stand in his power and tell his family how he felt, but hardly understanding what truly went into something like this. There was really this like push and pull energetically, where we would try and push each other away and somehow we would be pulled back in. It was I know I'm explaining this and it just sounds crazy, and there's never going to be enough words to articulate the experience that I shared with this person, because it was spiritual. So again, I'm going to just like fast track it, because you don't care about all the minutia. You're like, Sabrina, just get to the point of the conversation here. Get to the point. What are you trying to share with us? Some big pieces that I'll share. Okay, so there was a moment where he grabbed my hand and he wanted to feel into my hand, and he wanted to feel the energy of my hand, and he wanted to see the image of my hand, because if we're never going to talk again and never see each other again, because we would talk about that. We would talk about the fact that, you know, I would tell him, you are going to leave my life and I'm going to leave yours, and you are going to evolve and discover and become even more beautiful than you already are. And I'm going to be a lesson for you. It's like I actively knew this, and I chose to guide him, even though it could equal pain for me. When I realized how intense my feelings had gotten for him, I had decided that like it wasn't a good idea for us to talk anymore, because I didn't want to inflict any pain on myself going through it. And then ultimately, like I said, we would fall back into the cycle where we would start talking and he would show up and he would do engravings on wood. I would walk the tracks and he would have written words of like shine, because he had dedicated a song to me that she can't help but shine. And suddenly leaving rocks wrapped in leaves, and would draw a sun on my car. Like, you guys, it was innocent and so beautiful. He was so stressed. I remember towards the end of our connection, he wasn't sleeping. He was really struggling, and I thought I was supporting him as much as I could through the challenges with his culture and religion. And then one day he admitted to me that the reason he was stressed had nothing to do with the culture and religion anymore, but it was because of how much he had fallen for me and the way it has now impacted his family life at home, and the guilt and the shame and not wanting to feel this for me. And me too, I had so much guilt and shame. I remember I would go home prior to the full ending of my marriage and look at my husband and think, why can't I feel this for you? And it was so painful. It was so painful. Obviously, when my marriage ended, that's when the intensity of this connection grew. It became meditating in the forest and hand on heart, where he would place his hand on my heart and I'd place my hand on his, and we would just breathe in sequence. It was a single hug goodbye where, oh my God, like it felt like you wanted to live in each other's skin, and the gripping of the body, and then pulling away and being like, oh my God, like this is just too much. It was too much. If I'm being honest, it was intense. It was shattering. He showed up at a waterfall near my house one morning at like 1 a.m. And I'm like, why did you come to the waterfall? And he's like, I don't know, I had to be here, I wanted to see you. Like there was just so much intensity where it got to the point where he's like, I have to leave my relationship, I've fallen for you. And again, I had continued to say like, we are not going to be together, I have to mourn my relationship, you have to figure yourself out. he then told his family about how he felt for me. And that didn't go so well, you guys. His family was very against me and who I was and how I wasn't a part of the culture and I wasn't a part of the religion, and who I was went against everything that they believed. The tattoos I had, the way I showed up, I was a witch because of the crystals and the spirituality. It was really one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, and something that I never imagined going through. Also very outside my character to create a connection with someone and have a connection like this outside of his character. Basically, when he told his family about me, we had decided multiple times, that he was going to stop going to the gym. And again, even though he stopped going to the gym, we connected again and we were talking. It was like we were constantly brought back to one another. And he had said, Sabrina, my spirit is in love with you. Rin. That's where the name Rin comes from, you guys. I'll explain that a little bit more in depth. But Rin, my spirit is in love with you, but my ego is stuck in culture and religion. And I hope that my spirit eats me alive one day so that I find my way back to you. The way that cut so deep. He called me Rin, and the reason I go by Rin is because the way I showed up with him was the most spiritually connected, truest part of me, the healthiest part of me I've ever been with anybody. I showed all of my colors and was accepted fully and wholly in the most beautiful way. So even though he left my life, I was like, Rin is my spirit. Who I was able to show up as with this person is authentic to who I am in ways I didn't know possible. He pulled that part out in me as I pulled out so much truth in him. And I always say, RIN, the acronym for RIN, is recognizing your inner nature, realizing your inner nature. And that was what our whole connection was about. And I think that's the connection that we need to have in life, is self-actualization and connecting to your truth. His dad showed up one day and told us to stop talking. And he basically told me to separate myself from him because I'll never fully understand the culture and religion, and that he had to give it the benefit of the doubt and work on his marriage even though he didn't want to. And the rest is kind of history. And I share this with you guys, and there's like so much, like I wrote so many notes and I didn't even get through any of them. Really, I've just been like trying to piece all this together because, like I said to you, even I'm feeling anxious about this. He ultimately ended up going to therapy and decided to believe a story that helped him live his life and continue to live his life. And I wanted to mourn my marriage. But it was really hard to accept that there was such a beautiful connection like that with somebody. And how do we let go of something like this when it feels like you've never connected on such a deep level? And I recognize there was a lot of unhealthy behaviors wrapped into this because it wouldn't have been a solid foundation, you guys. And this is where we go into like right person, wrong time. There's no such thing as right person, wrong time. It's the right person if it's the right person. And it's certainly not the way I would have wanted to build a relationship. I knew it's like you have to go discover and I have to go work on me and find me. And if we're meant to be together in some universe, we will be. We will be. We were mirrors for one another. Two individuals who wanted to be seen, wanted to be heard, wanted to be loved. And we saw each other, and it was so, so beautiful. So where am I going with this, and why am I sharing this for you guys? Because the amount of tears I cried and the confusion I had gone through, because as you can imagine, I was still mourning 17-year marriage. I had no idea that I would fall for somebody else, didn't want to fall for somebody else. Now I'm mourning letting this person go. And my brain would be like, am I ever going to find somebody like this again? I remember he and I both said the chances of us experiencing a connection like we had on such a spiritual plane where you just felt this energetic pull was unlikely. He's like, how am I ever going to feel this again? How do I let this go? And I was like, how do I let this go? Like it was profound. And I know that I cannot be the only one who's ever experienced this and struggled to let it go. But what I discovered, you guys, what he had said to me was, without you, Rin, I can't be this guy. When I'm not with you, I can't be this guy. This very spiritually connected, knowing his inner knowing. He felt like he was in constant battle with himself and his culture and his religion and who he had to show up as. And also, did he want to embody that spiritual side of himself? It was scary for him. It was something that was pushing him back. What I recognized is it wasn't him that I was missing. It was the story I created about him. What I want you to know, if you are struggling letting somebody go, often you are struggling with the storyline that you have connected to them and not actually struggling and missing them. And you might say, I am missing them because there were moments where I missed his person, and I still very much miss his person. But what's different here is that you don't have to base your worthiness and fear never having a connection like this again and feeling like the, oh my God, doom and gloom. What if this never happens again? What if I never fall in love again? What if? Because the truth is that if they are who you think they are, if they are who you thought they were, they would be here right now. They would be in your orbit. Mine and his vibrational frequency changed. I chose to leave my marriage. Me and my partner had decided it was over. My vibrational channel was standing in my truth and working on myself and my worthiness and who I am and living and showing up authentically. His vibrational frequency had shifted to fear and, oh my God, and culture and religion. So when you're no longer a vibrational match, you will part ways. So we parted ways. The other piece was, in this relationship, often in your relationship, you will recognize you were the one who cultivated it. If it wasn't for you, the connection would have never happened. He couldn't be that person unless he was in my world. So I was like, oh my God, I created the connection. So even though you feel like all is lost and you feel like you're never going to experience this again and it feels sad, it was your energy that created the connection that you had. And that's so big because the love you have within yourself is the love you can give back to yourself. Then universe was like, I'm going to put someone in your orbit that is showing up and having similar conversations, Rin, as you had with this mountain man, this MM. It blows my mind, you guys. The universe placed someone beside me who's showing up in the same way with the same type of connection, only I have no connection with this person, no feelings romantically, but the universe showing me again, you can cultivate a very similar experience as you shared because that energy is within you, proving that your energy will attract that type of energy to be given back. And if it fits and it's the right person, it just will be. So I shared this whole story about this connection with this person that maybe you got through this, maybe you didn't. I don't know. We'll see how this video does and if there's anything that you have to say about it. But I just needed you to know, if you are struggling to move past a relationship, if you are struggling with acceptance, I shared this whole connection with this person and how deeply spiritual and how amazing it felt, because it doesn't matter how amazing it is. It doesn't matter how different it feels. It doesn't matter if you think that this is the only time, the one time you're going to feel this. There's a very, very large likelihood, like 99.99999% chance, that it was your energy that cultivated the relationship, that created it, which means it can be created again. It lives within you. It is your love that created it. And you will see, if you pay close attention and you don't hold on too tightly to the past, how these relationships will return in a different light. And it'll be up to you how you choose to respond to that energy.